John again, and straight in with another video. It's now the early hours of the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I thought, well, I'll do another video. This is inspired by two people, really. Partly by Big Star 1000's choose 10 records to show a particular kind of area of music, which I think is a great idea. Actually, it certainly stopped me rambling on for too long. And also Blake, who's been showing a lot of contemporary classical music recently as well. So I thought I'd talk about the kind of 10 of the records that got me interested in 20th century classical music. I mean, I should say before, I've been kind of loving for a lot of my life Bach and Beethoven, particularly Bach actually, Schubert, Liszt, Mahler, Bruckner and so forth as well, but I'm just going to concentrate on 20th century music. One of the first records I bought was a Bartok record, Music for Strings, Percussion, Celesta, which came out on the Argo label. I think Blake showed a different version of this actually a little while ago. There are lots of versions, of course. This really struck me. I think I love the percussion sound on this and the excitement of the music. And I always liked Bartok even more than Stravinsky actually for that kind of very visceral kind of sound to it. This came out on the Argo label, which was a subsidiary of Decca Records in the UK. Very interesting label. They kind of put out folk music, classical music, but also kind of recordings of trains and stuff like that as well. So that was Bartok's Music for Strings, Percussion, Celesta. Then I went hunting for some more Bartok and bought this record, which has his two Rhapsodies and also Berg's Violin Concerto, played by Yehudi Menuhin and conducted by Pierre Boulez and so forth, which came out on his master's voice in the late 60s. And I kind of ended up liking the Berg even more than I liked the Bartok in the end, and that got me interested in the whole of that kind of Viennese school and so forth. So straight on from Berg, I kind of saved up actually and really coveted this for a long time. I bought a box set of Schoenberg's works for chamber ensemble, conducted by David Atherton, performed by the London Symphony Orchestra, Decca. This is a 6-record box set. I won't open it up, but it's anyway. And the piece that really stood out for me initially on this was his piece called Verklarte Nacht, which is translated as Transfigured Night, which I must admit kind of confounded all my kind of expectations about what Schoenberg would sound like. Very lyrical, very beautiful piece. Almost sounds like kind of film music in a way. Well, that's not for a film. And there are two versions. There's a version for string sextet on here. And then I kind of liked it so much that I went and hunted down a version for string orchestra, which is on this record, which is again the Academy of St Martin in the Fields, conducted by Neville Mariner. And this also had pieces by Hindemith and Webern on. And I must admit, I then got really interested in it. I found Webern very difficult at first, but then started to get really interested in his music and kind of. I might even do another post on Webern at some point, because his stuff is hard work, but worth trying with, I think, actually. Again, on this Argo label, which I seem to be a mini collector of. I've got 2 records on that label. Then, and I can't remember what the connection was, I think it might have been Stomi Umashita, the Japanese percussionist, did a record with his band, which I've forgotten the name of, where he did a Takamitsu piece on here, and I kind of hunted down, this is a new copy actually, I had a battered old copy of Toru Takamitsu's some of his concert pieces, Asterism, Requiem, Green and the Dorian Horizon. And this came out on RCA Red Seal, and it has I'm not doing this justice by getting this reflection, this is a beautiful painting by Jasper Johns, the abstract painter on the front of it as well. This was, now Takamitsu went on to be an incredibly important kind of composer for me. Later on he started using a lot more traditional instruments in his work, but this was still using Western concert instruments on the pieces for Takamitsu. And I think I might do, his film music is extraordinary, and I think I might do a post at some time just on his film music. Just Takamitsu, very highly recommended. Then of course I knew about Cage, and I knew people were talking about being influenced by John Cage and so forth, so I thought I should actually try and buy some and hear some really. And initially I was attracted by the cover of this, I think, more than anything else. This was a piece which new electronic music for leaders of the avant-garde, which is on an American label, CBS subsidiary called Music in Our Time, or Cage with his Variations 2, performed by David Tudor, and also pieces by Milton Babbitt and Henri Pousser on here as well, which are synthesizer pieces and other experimental pieces as well. And I didn't really I got into the sound of this, I think, more than anything else, which is how I get into all music, actually. It's not about knowing how it's composed, but really what it sounds like more than anything else. And I love the sound of Cage, but I also was kind of interested in almost as much in his ideas as I was in his music and so forth. Very pink in this video. I'm not this pink in real life, I won't be having a heart attack. Okay, next up, still following up the kind of interesting Cage, really. This record I absolutely love. This was by a group called Gentle Fire, which was composers and other people involved with experimental music. And it had pieces by Earl Brown, John Cage, Christian Wolff, and that's it, actually. Two pieces that had Cage's music for toy pianos, which is very beautiful, amplified toy pianos, and his music for Carry On here as well. And I don't know why, I kind of love the sound of this record, I think, more than anything, actually. It's absolutely kind of got a gorgeous sound to this record, very nicely recorded, great production, and so forth. And this came out on EMI Electrola, which is the German EMI label, and also was reissued, I think, in Japan on vinyl as well. Really highly recommend this record. I don't know why, it kind of really just hit me, the sound of it more than anything else. I used to play it a lot, still do. Then, kind of following up the interest in kind of inevitably kind of Stockhausen featured in this, and I've shown this already, I think, in a post with Mark Basshead 4, but this was his telemusic and mixture, which was on Deutsche Grammophon records. I mean, Stockhausen was kind of big, kind of slightly on and off. I think I've been periods where I liked Stockhausen more than other times, but this was a kind of the first one that kind of got me hooked in, I think, to him. Really like his music from 7 Days as well, which I've got a version of somewhere. Then I started to kind of be a bit curious, really, about kind of just being interested in the kind of the British end, I guess, of just going to make an adjustment here. Looks slightly less pink now as well. Started getting interested in the kind of British experimental music, which is quite different to a lot of the American and European stuff. And there was a book that came out by Michael Nyman called Experimental Music, Cage and Beyond, which features all of the if you like, the heroes, if you like, of experimental music, but also looks at the British end of things as well. There's a new edition of this that came out a few years ago as well. It's a great book, actually, really well written. And that started to get me interested in composers like Gavin Bryan. And this is his record on Obscure label, the Brian Eno's Obscure label, which features two pieces, The Sinking of the Titanic and also Jesus' Blood Never Failed Me Yet, which are two extraordinary pieces, actually, one of which has been reissued a number of times. In fact, Jesus' Blood there's a single version of that with Tom Waits kind of singing on it, which kind of doesn't quite work really for me. So this is Gavin Bryan's kind of... Gavin Bryan's interesting also was an improviser. He worked with very early on with Derek Bailey and Tony Oxley in a band called the Joseph Holbrook Trio. So this is Gavin Bryan's pieces. I mean, most people know these two, I think, actually, but this was like, I certainly got into this, started getting me interested in the kind of British end of things. And then finally, kind of following that up, I mean, and talking about Brian Eno, there's a record by Cornelius Cardew called The Great Learning, which was on Deutsche Grammophon, which features the Scratch Orchestra, which was made up of musicians who weren't necessarily trained as musicians, based on Confucius, the Chinese philosopher. Huge influence on kind of methods, really, of somebody like Brian Eno. I mean, if you read any of his books, he mentions Cardew in this particular piece a number of times. And this was, again, on that kind of Deutsche Grammophon series. So it's Cornelius Cardew's The Great Learning, if I can get it in focus, the Scratch Orchestra. Quite difficult to find now, I think, actually, although there's been various reissues of it on CD, I think. And that's it. That's my interest. That's kind of sparked off. Now, I haven't talked about some people who are really important to me, like Morton Feldman, and I may well do another post on him at some point. And also as I said earlier on, definitely something on Takamitsu's film music. If you're interested in the drone that's going on in the background, it's wonderful composer called Eliane Radig, who's a French composer who, earlier in her career, she worked almost exclusively on the ARP synthesizer, making these amazing hour-long drone pieces. And more recently, she started composing for instruments. She's done an amazing piece for bass guitar, an amazing piece for basset horns as well, which is quite extraordinary. So I'll talk about Eliane at some point in the future as well. Anyway, definitely recommend this. It's kind of very good for this time of the day as well. So thanks for watching. Best wishes to everybody. Love the VC, and good morning, I suppose, rather than good night.